Cool. So this morning, as I said in the messages, we have in the past, and at your church, I'm sure there's always a lot of discussion around just the principles around money, the principles of generosity, the principles of tithing, um, the general things which are super important. But in that sort of setting, in the church setting, very rarely does it go into a bit of a more nitty gritty and practical way which Christians can spend their money. And uh, we're not going to talk too much about perhaps the generosity, giving to missions, tithing, because we kind of assume that that's already happening. We're talking about the money that's left over that you have to live on. That's the money we want to be talking about today. We want to talking about investment. We want to talk about insurance. We want to talk about those nitty gritty things and certain principles that can really be helpful for us as believers, and even for us to take that information and pass it on to our friends and people that we are reaching out to. Jesus spoke about money more than heaven and hell combined. So obviously, it's an extremely important topic. It's an extremely dangerous topic in the sense that it can become an idol very easily. So I think I want us to start that conversation with that framework that we are already assuming that we understand those biblical principles. And today is more about the nitty gritty practical things of what we can do in order to eventually make ourselves impactful for the long run. We want to make wise decisions with the resources God has given us in order to be impactful 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and even for our children in the future. So that's kind of what we're going to go for. And James has generously agreed to do this webinar for us. He's already done, I think was it a year ago or 2 years ago that he did a big event for us where with our alumni, we spent a lot of time. It was at Rosebank Union, and we spoke about some of the things that we're going to be speaking about today. And we also had some input from entrepreneurs and leaders in the field, lawyers, and really exciting stuff. So I think it speaks the language that perhaps sometimes pastors and spiritual leaders can't really speak with expertise. So we need godly Christians who are in those fields to speak from that perspective. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to James. I'm going to hand over. You can just give a little bit of a plug, just your background, and then it's totally over to you. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate you, and may it be a really blessed and fruitful time together with us this morning.
Cool. Thanks, Christo. So yeah, it's even though it's a Saturday, it's really nice to to be here. I think it's cool. I'm really keen to have these conversations. I mean, it's only 6 of us here, so I'm really keen to open the floor up a bit and chat about stuff that you guys think and how you guys feel about money and what you guys actually want to know. But yeah, so in terms of my play, Chris, if I may have a bit of creative license, what I'd like to do is share my view on money in principle, which relates to what I do, and then go into some practical stuff. And then I'd like to open up the floor. I think it's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation and to be practical about the practical. So, what you guys want to know and what you guys are dealing with and what you guys think. And what your view is. So if that's cool, I'll start. So, hi, Bonga. Okay, so we're just about to start. So let me just jump in. So firstly, for me, I think that, what did I write? Yeah, so I wanted to say just from my point of view, what, before I talk about how to use money, what money is to me. And in my business, because I'm a wealth manager, stewardship is at the forefront. So one of those really critical verses for me is Matthew 25, or the parable about the different talents and the bags of gold. And stewardship is at the core of what I do. And I think that for me, we think a lot about it's our money and how do we glorify God with it. And I think that's great. But I actually think that it's God's money. Like it actually, in my view, it's actually God's money. You know, in the beginning of Matthew 25, I've got my Bible open here. You know, Jesus speaking about the kingdom of heaven. It says again, it is like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. So I find that is a very helpful base to start off from when we talk about money, because it is such an important thing to know. It's not actually just my money, because I work really hard for it and it's mine, but I want to glorify God with it and do good and be generous and all that stuff. But I think it actually goes further. I think it's actually his money. You know, he blesses us, but it's actually his money that he entrusts to us, like he has put us in charge of the earth and the birds and the animals and all that stuff. So that has helped me personally go or deal with money in a better way, and I think something in a more healthier way, because it's his money. I'm literally just a steward, which is what Villic Wealth, my company, really puts at the core of money management and finance. Like, if I'm a steward of the thing, and the thing is money that is God's, how do I react? How do I use? And what do I do with it? So that for me is a baseline. And I think that really should be the starting point of how we look at money. You know, it's actually not our money. It's actually God's money. And we have the most amazing privilege of working hard and receiving that money as God entrusting the money to us to do stuff and to be a part of his glory story and the joy and stuff that comes from that. So that's like the starting point. So that salary, the paycheck you get isn't yours. It's God's paycheck that you're going to use and how you're going to use it. So I think that there are a few different hacks and a few different ways to look at it. But because money is so important, budgeting is one of the most critical things to do. It's really like, you're not going to go and propose to someone, just carry the ring around in your pocket and wait for the opportunity to propose. You're not just going to start a family and not think about it. These important decisions in our lives, where we go on mission, what job we take, we put so much effort and time and planning into, but the way we spend our money is almost nonchalant, you know? So I think that if I spoke about budgeting every day of my life for the rest of my life, it wouldn't be a waste, because it's such an important thing. And the only way you get control of your money is by managing it well. And the only way to manage it well is to start with a budget. So for me, the two, again, like, there's a great app called 22/7 that you can get that integrates all your finances into one, that you can work off and see what your balances are and your investments and stuff like that. That's a great app. As simple as using Excel and creating an income and expenses, breaking up fixed expenses and variable expenses, and then annual expenses, and then keeping a track of that is just fine. So with budgeting, I think we need to break it up into 3 areas. And one of my very good friends actually does it this way. And I think it's such a great example. So they break up their budget as send, save, and spend. And I think that's a great starting point, because it's God's money. The first thing we do is we're sending. So we're being generous and tithing and being missional and stuff. And not just because we have to, but because there's great joy in that. And it's a way that we play out our part of God's great glory story. So breaking up a budget also into sending, saving, and spending. Why do we save? I think we save because we only have a third to a half of our lives to make money, provide for ourselves in that time while we're making money, and for when we can't make money. Because the reality is, as we start in our 20s, we become more and more and more employable as we upskill ourselves, and we get to some point where we peak. And sometimes, depending on the environment, the job market, your specific ability, because some people are better at their job than others, and that's okay. but we will all peak in our employability at some stage, be it 45 or 55, whatever the case may be. We will peak, and then every year thereafter, we become less employable. So our ability to also earn becomes lower, or we might hit some sort of like a ceiling. But also, as we become less employable every year from, let's call it 55, we're also at greater risk of something happening. So if you were 57 and COVID-19 happened and you got retrenched and you weren't that employable already, your chances of becoming more of getting a job is dramatically lower than the person who's 43 and just finished a master's or something. So I think that the benefit we get, there's a point that we get less and less employable, and our risk becomes greater. So if we haven't planned and provisioned and saved a reasonable amount for a reasonable lifestyle, then we actually put ourselves into an unfavorable position. So for me, we send and we save. We save because we have 25 to 55 or 65 to make all the money that provides for us from 25 to 65, and then above that or beyond that. So we're going to, we're all young people here. And when I do retirement planning at the moment for people that are stepping into retirement between 55 and 65, we're looking at life expectancy rates in South Africa of between 84 and 91. So our parents are going to live on average to 80, 90. What does that mean for us? I think we're going to live 100, 110, even longer on average. So that is, it's something that some of the people are talking about in the investment world, the fact or the greater risk, what they call the longevity of retirement income, because we are going to live longer. I think you guys would agree, our generation seems to take much more health conscious decisions versus our parents or our grandparents. We also have got greater medical advancements. And I think very often we're in a space where we are doing better than what our parents are doing in terms of our earning potential or our career trajectory. So I think that all those things mean that we don't just have from 65 to 90. We've probably got from 65 to 105. We're probably talking 40 years. Now, we may be able to push our working age to 70 or 75, but we might not. And that then, if we rope that all into the space of we're going to work from 25 to 55, 65, 75, provide for ourselves, and we're going to have children or whatever the case may be, and we maybe have other people to support in that space. And then we've got to build up some sort of capital to provide a reasonable lifestyle from 65 or 70 to 105. It's critical to save. It's critical to manage our money well. And add on to that from whatever your number is, 45, 50, 58, 61, we become more and more unemployable. What we do between 25 and 40 matters a lot when it comes to that. So saving is definitely important, and it's above spending. It's above the you now. The you later is above the you now, because we're in a growth trajectory at the moment from 25 to 40, where we're educating ourselves, earning more income, growing career, all those sort of things. So what we do now with our money is super important. And that's why spend is at the bottom. It's send, save, and spend. Yeah. And then practically on the budget, Excel spreadsheets work great. The 22/7 app works great, or any one or two other ways you can do it. But when you're doing a budget and you're breaking it up, you really want to bring in your net income. You don't want to make decisions based off a gross income amount or a cost to company or anything like that. You want to work on your net income. And then you want to divide variable expenses, fixed expenses, and annual expenses. And a budget means nothing if you just do it once. A budget is a part of your monthly routine. So what I normally suggest is what you should be doing is by the 7th of the month, you should have planned or budgeted for the next 2 months, and you should have done the actuals for the past month. So when you do a budget on Excel, you've got all your stuff down the one side, boom, 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 boom. You've got your saves, your send, save, spend, and then a part of that is variable, fixed, and annual. Then in your columns over here, I think what you want to be doing is having an estimate or a budgeted amount and an actual amount for each month. So then by the 7th of any given month, so when you're doing all your stuff at in the beginning of the month, one of the things you need to do is a budget. And by the 7th of the month, I normally suggest you need to look at having projected the estimated numbers for the next 2 months and completed the actual numbers from the past month. And that's something that you can track. And again, when you're making big financial decisions, boom, you pop up your budget on your screen. You can spend 20 minutes looking at it, understanding it, and looking at it like almost a chessboard. I mean, that's an example I like to use a lot. Like in chess, and you guys would probably have a good understanding of a concept called opportunity cost, but every move counts. And in every move that you make or every rand that you use, you could have used for something else. And that sort of opportunity cost is an important thing to look at. So in chess, when you make a move, you could have made another move. When you spend 100 rand on your budget, you're saying you're not spending it here. So having that budget in front of you gives you a real opportunity to see what your trend has been and to see what you can do going forward. And that's crucial. Like if you don't do the budget every month, some people say do weekly budgets, but if you don't do a budget really regularly, like once a month, and you don't keep yourself accountable to the budget, it's not worth doing. And a budget is obviously worth doing because money is one of the most important and perhaps dangerous and in a hopeful way, one of the coolest parts about being alive and about our walk, because there is so much joy to be had in honoring God and having a healthy relationship with money. And there's so much danger in not doing it properly that you need to take it seriously. And to take it seriously, you need to do a budget. And to make the budget count, you need to look at it every month at least. So yeah, that's just on the budget. And I don't know if we should have for questions now or if we should go on to the next one. So what I think is that we will, I want to go on to, I don't know, guys, what are we going to do? Is there a chat here? There's a chat?
Yeah, I think
Christo, what do you want to?
People can ask questions now, but also as you talk, they can put their questions in the chat box and then you can obviously look through them and then answer them as they come in or at a specific time.
Okay, cool.
Can I ask a question now? Sorry.
Yeah.
So James, you mentioned about the Excel spreadsheet. I've tried to make one on my own and I don't know if I do it well. Do you have your own standard one that you share with clients? And if it's possible, could you share it with us? I don't know.
Yeah, I do, and I can.
Oh, please, that would be so helpful. Thank you.
Cool. So just one thing on a budget, we've got these things called annual expenses. We've got like our car license fees, we've got car services, and a few other things like that we have to pay every year. And what we often do is actually forget about those. So our budget would have all the stuff now, like all the debit order stuff that goes off, and then like our variable stuff that we'll probably spend some money on food and entertainment, etc. And then the rest we think that okay, that's sort of spoiling myself because I've done all the good stuff, and now the rest of this money is for me, or for me to be generous with or whatever. But we forget about our annual expenses, and in those months we then tend to not to have money and have to use a credit card or overdraft or something. So with annual expenses like car license fees or a car service, what you should do is work out what the average cost is. So if the average cost is for the servicing of your vehicle is 2,400 Rand, then you should be saving 200 Rand a month. So in your budget should be an entry for 200 Rand a month, building up or taking account for that particular annual expense. And then actually practically when your money comes into your account, most banks allow you to have like savings accounts and saving pockets and that sort of thing. And that's a great space to actually sort of live out certain of those like goals or commitments, financial commitments. So you could have, as the money comes into your account, move everything to your savings account and just keep enough in your account for debit orders, and then have 2 or 3 or 4 savings accounts that are for different things. So your one is like your generosity fund or whatever the case may be. You've got an annual expenses fund and that sort of thing. So you can actually set up on quite a few of the banks a few different savings pockets. And if not, you could go to a bank like Time Bank, TYME, that allows you to create different savings pockets. And you could then create different accounts like that for your annual expenses. So you just an annual expenses pocket, or one for each one for car and those sort of things. And then every month you can actually transfer money in there. And then my other thing that I think stems from a budget is about goal setting. So I think we've obviously got our money that needs to provide for us now, but we all have obligations and goals that we want to achieve. And the way that I break goals up into is short-term emergencies. So there's this concept of an emergency fund that we need to be building up. A lot of us have family obligations and stuff like that. We've got to support nieces and nephews or parents or brothers and sisters. We've got family obligations. Again, another type of account or provision I think we need to be making every month is a family obligation provision, or what I call a family obligation account. And then we need to be setting sort of goals a bit further. We need to look at, when we're looking at our budget, we're looking at how we're spending our money. We need to look forward and we need to say, well, what are some of our goals? So I think the one goal is to achieve an emergency fund. The next goal is to have some sort of capital, some sort of provision to provide for the people that need it in my family obligations. Then I think we look at what are those sort of goals that we want. Do we want to buy a house? Do we want to get married? Do we want to go on holiday? We've got this sort of short-term personal desires or goals that we want. So what are they? How much are they going to cost, and when are we going to do it? So what are they? How much are they going to cost, and when are we going to do it? So let's say it's a holiday, right? So we want to go on holiday, or we want to save up for a house, or we want to get married. We need to identify those goals and then plan for them. And then we go a bit longer. Now we were saying the saving. So how much are we saving? What are we saving? And why are we saving it? Yes, we need to build up retirement capital. We need to build up money for when we're less employable or when we can't work anymore. And how do we do that? So setting up some sort of a retirement fund or a long-term investment. So again, in our save part, I think that's what we're looking at. So we need to build up an emergency fund, family obligation fund for a lot of us, short-term goals, and then long-term goals. For example, this retirement provisioning sort of thing. And again, a great way to do that is the smaller stuff like an emergency fund. We could create a separate savings pocket and put money in there. Family obligations, we could create the separate savings pocket, or go to Time Bank and open up a savings account, or with Capitec, like a separate account. And we can put into our budget how much we're saving into that. And then we can actively, in the beginning of the month, in the first 7 days, we can actively put our money there. And then we've got short-term goals, whatever that may be, a holiday or a wedding or whatever. Identify that and start saving into there. And then you've got your long-term savings. So I would say that building up a retirement provisioning is almost a thing on its own, because as a part of your obligation of managing your money better is so that you're not a burden on the people around you in your retirement, whatever your retirement may look like, which could be super missional, it could be beach, it could be whatever. But whatever your retirement looks like, you're going to not be able to work you won't be able to make as much money because you'll be less unemployable. You may not be that mobile, and you need money that can pay you a reasonable, decent, healthy, sustainable income to provide for you in that space. So that's almost separate. So a big chunk of savings is going to that, because you've only got 25 to 65 to make money for now and for the 40 years thereafter. And 40 years is a long time. So you've got 40 years to make 80 years worth of money. That's crazy. So that's something on its own almost, as sort of one thing. And then I think that all the other stuff is sort of another thing. So emergency, family obligation, short-term goals, they're all another thing. And for them, you can create different savings pockets. What I think is that if you've only got 2,000 Rand in a month to commit to all of these things, I would say that in that space, you need to then put it on priority. You know, if we've got 2,000, how much are we giving? 1,000 Rand to one, and then 250 to another, and then 500 to another. What are we doing? And basically make those determinations on priority. But I definitely think in terms of the save sort of part, the most important is the retirement part. And then, as let's say, half of your savings. And then the rest is, how do I split it up between stuff like emergency, family obligation, and that sort of thing. Because I just, in my personal opinion, I think that we have a responsibility with the money that we make to provide for the time that we know we won't be able to make that money. And it's obviously examining your heart, working out the right numbers. It's not like I want to become rich in retirement and hoard all my money. It's the fact that I need to pay medical aid, buy food, etc., in that space when I can't work anymore. So it's not like a greed thing we need to check, but it's a obligation thing. Like it's our obligation to our future selves. So we have to do that. And if we're not doing that, in my opinion, we are not being responsible. And then we've got that other stuff, emergency fund, etc., which are also important. But yeah, so I see there are one or two questions, and let's check that out. Okay, where's the top and the bottom? Okay, so the top is what are the dangers in having the send, save, spend order wrong? So spend, save, spend for interest, for instance. So again, if we put ourselves first and we say spend first, I think the first thing for me is it breeds a wrong view of money, because the reality is all people. I mean, I felt it, and a lot of us feel it. Money is alluring. It's this thing that we give so much of ourselves to, and in return, we get money and pleasure and reward and satisfaction. So the coolest thing for me personally, and I think it's an important topic or important point, is when we send first, when we give first, it breaks to some degree the power that money has on us. Because the reality is we're just giving ourselves to our job. It takes up most of our day. We're just giving ourselves to this work. And for that, we get reward and satisfaction. But we also are in the cycle of we do all this and we give ourselves and for that we receive satisfaction and pleasure from money. So if we give first, it's almost like we're saying, no, money, you come down and you sit there. You're just a tool. Either you don't control me, so I'm giving first. I'm breaking the cycle. So I think that's something really cool. And the reality is we can always find something to spend our money on. And that's why budgeting helps. So if we structure something, it's like the way in which you structure a day, or you set sort of, it's just about structure and discipline. Because we can always find stuff to spend money on. And if we spend money on ourselves first, practically very often there's a good time that we're just going to run out of money. We're not going to have money to save. or to send. And I actually had that with myself personally. Like I said, I was gonna give this amount of money away, and I didn't do it in the first. And now I can't give that money away because I've spent some of it. So I have to give like a little bit of it away. So that's something I'm rebuking myself about right now. Actually, it's a different story. But yeah, I think that just it's practical. And then what's the next question? What do you suggest to save for in a 32-day investment account? You see, 32 days is maybe almost, it depends, almost irrelevant. I would say a holiday would probably be a good idea. Yeah, so I think you want to look at more like a 7 day. So, okay, we've got different things we've got to do. So we've got emergency fund. Emergency funds are for emergencies. It's for those things that we couldn't plan for, because a car service you can plan for. It's not an emergency. But hitting a pothole, bursting your tire, and breaking a rim, cracking your rim, that's an emergency, and other things like that. So an emergency fund you can't put into a 32-day investment account because you don't need it. Anything. So the answer is you can put anything into a 32-day investment account that you're happy to wait 32 days for. I think that it almost becomes, I'm sure I can't think of anything right now. I'm sure we can find something for it. But in my mind, a better option is something like TimeBank or a savings pocket that actually you can have access to within a day or two, but still get some sort of a meaningful interest. Then long term, if you are saving for a house, you can use these longer term investments, like 12-month type investments. But I would say you need to whatever you can wait 32 days for, you can use that for. And then what's the next one? What in your opinion is a healthy percentage to give towards a retirement annuity? So again, it's going to depend, but there are a few things that, or a few rules of thumb that people throw around. And those rules of thumb are all between 10 and 20%. I normally use the 15% rule, but I would say 15% of gross income, because in retirement you've got to pay tax too. So if you, so it's, I would say no less than, 15% of gross income for long-term savings, which will build up a retirement, and that would include a retirement annuity. And then the next question here, it sort of links to that. What fund, e.g. tax-free investment, balance fund, or money market is great for long-term investment? Again, it's difficult. In theory, from an advice perspective, one needs to look at an individual risk profile and understand a particular client's need. But generally speaking, the longer you can leave your money, the more risk you can take with that money. So whenever you have short-term type goals or savings, you want those in the bank. You want those in fixed deposits, in savings accounts, in savings pockets. You don't want to commit them to risk because you may need them in a month or two or a day or two and that sort of thing. So you can't expose those to risk. But the longer you can leave your money, the more you can actually, the more risk you can take. So Easy Equities is a great platform where you can buy ETFs and other and shares and that sort of thing. I think that, again, when you look at investments, you look at what we call asset classes. You've got cash, bonds, properties, and shares. And that basically goes in the spectrum of cash, bonds, properties, and shares. And shares are high risk and cash is low risk. So the more you go through, the longer you have, the more you can invest in shares and property, because you're allowed investment to recover if there is some sort of a drop in value. And the shorter you have, the more you should be in like cash and stuff. The next question from Stefan is making sacrifices to set yourself up for the long term. I currently work in Kenya, and It has helped me to save up and pay off a lot of debt. But I want to get married next year. My fiance wants to work in SA. We already decided that I'll go back after this 1 year. And what are your thoughts about the scenario like this? So, yeah, I think that, I think you got to break it up. You got to look at your. So I'm trying to understand the question a bit, but in terms of sacrificing finances and how do you provision between short-term and long-term, that's sort of what I'm getting from the question, Stefan. And my answer to that would be you need to go according to what you've been given. So if you have, you need to be saving, you need to be living, and you need to be giving. So once you've done that, and once you've saved your 10-15% into the retirement community, once you've given your money in a generous way, and once you've spent money on what you have, you can have a look at, or what you need, you can have a look at what's left. So you've got to ask yourselves questions like how expensive does my wedding have to be? How long do I have to wait? Or how long can I wait? So you don't necessarily have to look at, I'm going to stop my retirement investments because I want to get married. So I need to use that money for my wedding. I wouldn't think that that's a good call. I would think what you'd want to just think about is, so listen, I'm saving $5,000 a month into retirement funds. I'm giving what I'm giving, which is I feel good, and I'm spending 20,000 or 10,000 rand on myself. Now I want to get married. I want to get married in the next year or so. What do I do? So, okay, well, really say, well, how expensive does my wedding have to be? Or what's that number? So just plan it out. Now I'm going to spend 60,000 on my wedding. How much do I have to save to get there in a year? And then where can I cut? And the answer is you don't just cut from your savings or from your giving. You can cut from your personal, how much you spend, and maybe a little bit from what you're giving. But you shouldn't go into debt to fund a wedding, because there's a lot of pressures around engagements and weddings and stuff, and people telling you you can invite and who you can't invite and what your wedding needs to look like. But so it's a tough conversation, and money is a very determining factor in that, because if your family wants you to have a big wedding, you're going to need money. So it's those sort of questions first I think we need to ask. So listen, how expensive does my wedding have to be? And then how can I sort of fund it without taking too much away from savings? Because what we tend to do is to stop saving for 2 years because I want to get married, but we still live the same life that we do. And maybe we should reduce our monthly expenses by 2,000 rand and don't eat out a lot, or whatever the case may be. Reduce our spending and maybe reduce our giving a bit, but proportionately, and that's it. Maybe. So yeah, it's dependent. I hope I've answered your question. I felt like I'll give myself a not such a good one, but yeah, okay, cool. What's the next one? Patricia, investing towards a child's tertiary education. So what I'm actually interested in, or my view on saving for a child's education, is actually a bit different to a few people. So this is my view. Again, I think for you, you need to identify how important it is to you, and I would put it into one of those buckets or pockets or strategies. I've got emergency fund, etc. And instead of going on holiday or whatever, or in addition to, I want to save for my child's education. And this is sort of where does it sit on the priority of those different funds, and then how much can I commit to it from my spend, and just save that every month and do the best you can. My personal opinion is that saving for tertiary education is not that important, in my opinion. So in my opinion, there are other things that are more important than saving for your child's tertiary education. I think what you need to be looking at more is making sure that you have done stuff like saving for retirement. Because if it's a choice between saving for my child's education and saving for retirement, in my view, I think you've got to ask yourself, if I don't save for retirement and I don't have enough so that I can put my child into the best varsity, am I saying that if I don't have enough, because I paid for him to go to varsity, he can support me, so I'm okay with, or she can support me because I'm okay with not having enough? So that's something that I think around, if that makes any sense. Your retirement is more important than saving for your child's tertiary education, because there are different ways to do tertiary education. There's bursaries, you can pay for it yourself, you can take a gap year. There's all these other things that may be a character building exercise, in my opinion, in that context. And that's sometimes an unpopular opinion, but I think that your retirement is more important than your child's tertiary education. So if you have saved enough for retirement according to your projections and your plans, and you have an emergency fund build up, and you've had an emergency fund, you can then look at, well, instead of having a family obligation or saving for holiday or whatever the case may be, I'm putting all my money after saving for retirement and emergencies, I'm putting towards my kids' education. That's great. That's 100%. And whatever that number is going to be a blessing on your child. But I think that if you've got to choose, I think it's your responsibility, in my opinion, that your emergency fund and retirement savings come first. Because tertiary education, there are many ways to skin that cat, including gap years, bursaries, and sometimes just working hard. It's and it comes from a personal opinion, but that's what I think. And there's another question here about tax-free savings. What else? Yeah, okay. So tax-free savings offer high interest, but one is limited to how much you can contribute. That's correct. At the moment, it's 36,000 a year that you can contribute. They've been increasing it. It used to be 30,000 a year, then it was 33, and now it's 36 that you can put into a tax-free investment every year. And there's a lifetime cap of 500,000. That's correct. Also, very, very true. I think that if you put money into a tax-free investment, it should be for the long term. And don't make the mistake of using it like a savings account and withdrawing regularly, because SARS takes note of what you put in. So if you put in 30,000 and you take out 15, SARS still records that you've put in 30. So if you take out 15, you use it up and you put it back in because you've saved it again, you are then, SARS says you put in 30 and now you put in another 15. So you put in 45, even though there's only 30 in your account. So that works against you because a tax-free has a lifetime cap of 500,000 Rand. So on the tax-free investment, the best thing the best thing to do with a tax-free savings or investment account is to use it as a part of your retirement savings. So there are two things you've got to have when you start earning. You've got to have a retirement annuity and you've got to have a tax-free investment. And you use them together, because the way a tax-free investment is structured is so you can put in the 36,000 a year, no more, otherwise you get penalized. But you don't get anything for putting it in. You don't get deductions or anything. But while the money sits in there, it grows tax-free. So there's no dividends tax, there's no capital gains tax, and there's no tax on interest. So it's a great vehicle when it builds up to generate capital growth, because they only check what you put in. They don't check how much is in the account in terms of the limits. So if you put in 36,000 a year for about 15 odd years, you get to 500,000. So according to legislation, you've put in the maximum that you put in. So it's 500,000. But that money can grow as much as it can grow. There's no limit on how much growth you can have. And all the growth in a tax-free investment is tax-free. And then you can withdraw it at any time tax-free. So the best thing to use it for in that context is to start a tax-free investment as soon as you can. And in most tax-free investments, you can set the underlying investment option. So one with a bank is not a good idea, because the only option there is like a fixed interest linked investment. So you're just getting sort of a cash type return. But if you push that into an investment with an investment platform like Allan Gray or Investec or whatever the case may be, you can choose between low risk, medium risk, and high risk investments within the tax-free investment. So you can go into shares or property or all these stuff that are growth assets, and you can really over time grow your money well. So you want to start the tax-free savings as early as possible. You want to put in the 36,000 every year, or as close to that as you want. And you want to get to that 500,000 as quick as possible. So if you start at 25, you're at that 500,000 at about 40, and invested in high growth high growth assets, so that you can grow a lot, knowing that I'm taking on risk. So over the time, the value can go up and down. I can lose money, I can make money, I can lose money, etc. So you take on risk, and you must be okay with that. And then by 40, you've put in 500,000, but the investment could have grown. It could have been 600,000 or 700,000 or whatever the case may be. And then you leave it. You leave it and you let it grow, and it just builds and builds and builds, because, or it's also then very effective, because if you had that money in a savings account, you'd receive interest, and your interest would be taxable in your hands. In a tax-free savings account, it's not. If that money was in shares that you bought or something, you'd have capital gains tax implications, interest income implications, and dividend tax implications. So the tax-free investment is the most effective at that stage. And then you can leave it for 20 years from 40 to, sorry, my light is automatic. So sorry. Anyway, that broke my stride. Back to business. So for 40 years, at 40, you leave it, it can keep on growing. And then by the time you're 60, you've got this massive tax-free investment account that's growing tax-free. And then you can just turn it on in retirement. And you can set up a regular withdrawal of whatever is reasonable and works at that time. And you can draw tax-free income in retirement. Because in the retirement stage, if you have all this money in the bank, let's say you've saved up 5 million in the bank, you're earning interest on that 5 million and you're paying tax on that 5 million. If you bought a bunch of properties, you're earning rental income, it's taxed in your hand as income, as rental income. You pay tax on it. If you've got in a bunch of shares, you're selling off shares to pay for your lifestyle, for your income, capital gains tax, dividends, etc. So you put it into a pension, or you get a pension from work or a living annuity, whatever you draw is taxed as pension income. So it is such a powerful tool. If you start early, invest in growth assets, take the good with the bad and take the risk, be okay with it, get to 500,000 as quick as possible, which is no more than 36 a year at this point in time, and then leave it and let it grow. Yeah. What else? Cool. How much time do we have left? It's 5 minutes.
Make the best use of it. 5 minutes. This has been so helpful so far. Does anyone still have a question?
Yeah. What are you guys thinking? There's a lot to say. I think that while you guys think of 1 or 2 questions, but I just think it's important. Like, we need to get practical and get accountable and look at our situations. And a budget, I thought budgets were dumb. I really did, but they're so powerful. They're so worth it. And I think we just need to be honest with ourselves. We need to look at our budgets, and we need to. The more you structure your money, the more freedom you will have with it, and the more you realize it's actually God's money, and see the joy in that, and look for the joy in that, and how He's going to use you to grow His kingdom. The more healthier your relationship with money would be. The more you give, the more you break the power money has on you, because it's normal. We all feel that attraction to it. And you're not going to be perfect. Sometimes you're going to spend money on stuff that you shouldn't have spent money on, and that's sort of okay. And then Chichi, just on RAs, they're 2 different, for me, they're 2 different types of retirement annuities. There's good ones and bad ones. And it's a longer conversation, but you can get from all the major investment houses like Allan Gray, 91, which was Investec, PPS Invest, and others, get really good retirement annuities. And there are retirement annuities on the market that aren't that good. What you want to look for is retirement annuities that don't pay upfront commission, Look for retirement annuities that have as and when fee structures. Look for retirement annuities with companies that have a good reputation, and ask, you can do it yourself, should probably go through a broker, but when you're getting a retirement annuity should be part of your plan. It really should be part of your plan. It shouldn't be your the main part of your the main point or the only thing. It's got to be part of your plan. And ask some questions. You want to go. You want to go again for long-term savings, more in more growth assets, and for short-term savings in more cash type stuff. I don't know what else. What else are we talking about? We got some time. The other thing I wanted to mention that I've been thinking through a bit, and I've heard one or two people also speak about it, which is really, which I found very insightful, was, our family obligations. I think that depending on our circumstances, it's a complicated discussion. What I like about what I've heard from a few people and what I've been thinking through is setting up a family obligation account. So actually having an account and putting money in there every month, trying to build that account up to however much, let's just call it a couple of thousand. Let's say we want 10,000 Rand in our family obligation account. And let's say we can commit 1,000 Rand a month to it. Then we should try really hard with our emergency funds to build up that sort of family obligation account. Because we're going to look at our budget. We make what we make. We have what we have. We can't get into debt to provide for our family, especially if it's not like super important stuff, I don't think we should be getting into debt really, unless it's, I'm speaking generally, but a lot of the time I think it's would be really practical and helpful to look at your budget and to be honest with yourself and say, well, how much can I reasonably commit? And let's say it's 1,000 Rand. And how much should I have? And let's say I should have 10,000 Rand in there. So I'm going to commit to, because I know it's a good reasonable amount, 1,000 Rand a month. I'm going to build up this family obligation account. And then that's my family obligation account. I'm giving as much as I can to that account without being selfish or being perhaps irresponsible and getting into debt and stuff. But build up that account, and then that account's that account. I mean, you're not savior. We are not the saviors of the people around us. So if we've diligently built up a family obligation account and are building that up regularly, that's what we have. That's what we can give. That is our capacity. We are not savior to everybody. So we can try really hard. We can help people look for other funding options, etc., etc. But what we have saved up and what we have to give is what we have to give. I like that. I like that sort of a structure. So listen, I'm giving a lot of money every month to my family obligation account. This is what I'm building up. And when people need stuff, this is what I have. And I'll make a decision every time. If it's something like school shoes or something, or school fees, like sure. And we need to. I need to keep my niece in school. Like it's super important. So I'm going to go. I've got a couple of grand in there. I'm going to use it. But there's some situations where I don't have any more money, and if I don't have any more money in my savings account, and I've structured my budget well, and I'm living a reasonable lifestyle, and I can't sacrifice any bit, and I'm giving, and I'm saving a reasonable amount, and this is all I have left, and I've given it, then maybe it's an opportunity to say, well, let's help you find funding somewhere else. And I think you then have the what's the word? You have the ability, and you can, without guilt, to say, no, I can't help because I've given everything that I have. Next month I'll have another 1,000. No, I don't. I think you have the license to do that. That's my view. And there's one more question, Christo. Sorry, I just thought now. Can I quickly tackle it? Do you guys?
Quickly tackle it, and then I'll
how does an RA work? If, let's say, you have 1 and 2 years or 5 years down the line, you lose your job and you can't add to any funds, what are the repercussions? Great question. This is one of the points I should have made. When looking for a retirement annuity, you want to look for something that is as and when fees, and you need to ask questions like this. Great question, Bonga. Because certain RAs are going to only give you a premium holiday. Certain RAs say that if you stop, you'll have a penalty. And those aren't really good RAs. Good RAs are RAs that allow you to stop and start contributions whenever you want without any penalties. And there are RAs like that around. These as and when RAs so that's it. So some RAs will actually say, if you have a premium holiday for a couple of months, and then if you can't pay your premium, we make the RA paid up, and there's a penalty on the value, and that's it. And those aren't good RAs. Good RAs, and there are them around, they basically say that you can stop and start your debit orders and your contributions at any time without any penalties. You can also add lump sums into the RAs at any time without penalties. Normally, all you have to do is just fill in a form and that sort of thing. But there are no penalties, and that's an important aspect. Yeah. But you can't access your RA before 55, and then only at 55 can you take a third. So it's also, when you're investing in RA, your money's committed. You can't get it out and use it for something. It's committed for until 55 at least, and the rest you got to use to buy a pension or invest in a pension.
Sure. This has been very insightful, and feels like we could have still spoken for another 3 hours. But yeah, I put your number there, and I'm hoping if people have questions that they still have, that if they can, feel free to just pop you a WhatsApp call.
Yeah.
But this has been so helpful. We just want to thank you for your time and your investment, and this has been amazing. Hopefully what has been shared really shapes and molds us and allows us to make wise decisions. And I also want to just say thank you for everyone who joined. This is, as you know, our last mobilization event for the year. And may God use each and every one of us in the places where He has placed us, in our workplaces, in our families, in our communities, to glorify Him. And I'm just hoping that some of the content that we've been sharing at these webinars has been helpful for that. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and God bless all of you.
Thank you, everyone. The privilege. Bye.